Hi, my name is Emily Olson. I'm a senior editor with Moby Health News here conducting interviews for HIMSS TV. The past year has been crazy for telehealth. Can you tell me a little bit about what your past year during the pandemic has been like?
Yeah, absolutely. Telehealth has been the thing that's coming for several years, right? Everyone's known that it's the future, but not everyone has been totally ready to embrace it and to proliferate it throughout their organization. We knew, we had a high confidence when we got into telehealth that we would see an inflection at some point. We didn't know that inflection would be a pandemic, but it was. Fortunately, we were, for the most part, prepared for it. It was quite a spike. Almost overnight, we saw utilization jump by 12x.
That's insane.
And everyone in our sales group and executive group, we were taking meetings at 3 a.m. on Sunday nights to really meet the new demand. Everything from cities who were needing telehealth solutions in order to start triaging potential COVID patients to IDNs who hadn't previously had a solution in place or who were finding that their existing solutions were buckling under the new strain.
Yeah.
So it was, particularly early on, it was a crazy time getting a lot of new customers online. Onboarding was certainly a challenge at some point. At one point we onboarded over 7,000 providers inside of 10 days. And our solution is such that it is highly configurable for specific workflows so that it mirrors virtually very closely what you see in clinic. So it's more than just the sitting on a park bench kind of two-way video Zoom solution. It accommodates everything from scheduling to waiting room management and charting and e-prescribe and post-care treatment and all of that. So getting all that spun up for new customers and in place so that they were efficiently seeing such an increased volume of patients remotely was a challenge. But it's one of those problems. From a business standpoint, it's one of those problems you like to have, right? It's a high-class problem. Clearly, we don't like to see it as the result of a pandemic. Mm-hmm. But I have my thoughts on how the pandemic itself, even in the way that it has manifest, certainly has a silver lining for society as well. It strikes me that having seen how unready we were for a pandemic, COVID really showed us that. It taught us what we don't know about even down to the basics of disseminating information, let alone bringing new vaccines online and distributing them. We learned a lot.
So you mentioned how you had to onboard a bunch of new doctors. A lot of people are doing remote onboarding lately, including myself. How has that changed your perspective? How did you manage that? And was it really difficult in the beginning?
Yeah, it is really different. We have been for, like a lot of companies, we have been a distributed team, so we have had tools in place ourselves to be able to work well remotely. Mm-hmm. But we also take a very consultative approach to the delivery of our product. And we typically will send our marketing and our principal consultants out to an IDN and do workflow sessions with them and go on site with their providers and see exactly what they're doing so that we can configure our product to be optimally effective for them. And then we'll fly our training team out and we'll spend several days training their trainers, again on site with them. And none of that was possible over COVID. All of it had to be done remotely. There we had to spin up a lot of new remote processes in order to make sure that we were still communicating the right information, communicating it well, making sure that it was disseminated to all the right people, that we were connecting to all the right people, also in an atmosphere where many of the right people were actually furloughed. So it was a challenge, but in the end, it worked.
Right. What do you think the future of telehealth is right now? I know there are some barriers to adoption, especially like payment parity, a constant regulation issue. What do you think is the future right now?
Yeah, I don't see payment parity as a real obstacle at this point, only because it's trending so strongly in the right direction. Right. So long as we continue to demonstrate that quality care can be and is being delivered remotely, then payment parity is going to come. Payers and CMS are seeing that it's more efficient to deliver a whole lot of categories of care remotely. and you're able to reach a much larger population that way than you can insisting that everybody come in clinic for everything. Not only that, but as we roll out new solutions for remote patient monitoring and devices that connect over cellular networks and pass all of their telemetry up to us, we can analyze it in the cloud and then pass that on to doctors when the patient presents. That just means that so much, in many cases, far from having less information about the patient in a remote visit, we actually have more if we're able to leverage data that's coming in from everything from wearables to RPM hardware. So the future of telehealth, it's, first off, we're not going to be calling it telehealth for much longer.
Something better.
Today it's telehealth. In a few years, it's just going to be health.
Right.
Where the lines between remote care and on-site care are being blurred to such a degree that people aren't even really going to think about what aspects of their care they're getting remotely and what aspects they're getting in clinic anymore. Gartner tells us that by next year, or by 2023, 30% of all patient-provider visitor encounters are going to be remote. Those aren't just discrete, urgent, and PCP visits. If we're going to get up to 30%, that means that a lot of points of care for chronic condition management and other forms of care will be distributed remotely. But it's just going to be interspersed. You're going to be going into the clinic for one aspect of care, you're going to be doing another one remotely from home. Our own upcoming care management products will facilitate those very effectively, so the patients don't even have to think about it. They just see it all laid out in front of them. Okay, I have to go into Sonora Quest to submit my lab work, but then I'm just going to be sitting in my living room as we review it. Then I have to go into the PT clinic. The living room is just going to become another accepted aspect or location for care delivery. And that's when it starts to get exciting, when patients are so comfortable with the delivery of their care that they don't have to think about it, that they can essentially outsource it to companies like eVisit and others in the space who are able to make it so easy and so convenient that it's something they have to devote so much less thought to.
Right. Is that something you guys are thinking a lot about in terms of finding populations that maybe aren't sure about telehealth, maybe older people who have a harder time managing that, or people who struggle getting access to high-speed internet? Is that something you're considering as well?
Yeah. Where those who have difficulty getting access to high-speed internet, fortunately, are far, far fewer today than they have been. And 98% of those in the United States have access to broadband internet. And with satellite internet services coming online, that remaining 2% will have good access options much sooner than later. Those populations that maybe have some hesitancy naturally, and this is something that COVID has done too, it's kind of dragged them along.
Yeah.
But we've had to learn to accommodate some of those on the fly. For example, we were bringing Alzheimer's wards up.
Oh, wow.
And found that many of those patients, they don't have the ability to go through any kind of a registration or an intake process.
Right.
So we built out what we call our quick entry modality, which allows for a patient just to jump in without going through any preamble, right into a visit and speak to a care access representative who then can handle the registration and intake on behalf of the patient, and then transfer the patient on to a triage nurse and then on to the provider. All of that so that patients who would naturally have difficulty with the technology have someone holding their hand at every step along the way. So there have been those learnings along the way as well, and we'll continue finding that. We'll continue finding pockets of patients that maybe are less familiar with technology or more hesitant to do it remotely. And our solution is always going to be to get product people out there right next to them, seeing how they operate, seeing what their hesitancies are, and working around that.
Gotcha. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today.